Good evening. My name is Amit. I am talking to you from our center, ashram in Delhi, Ananda, Delhi. So this is a reading from the book Living Wisely, Living Well by Swami Kriyanandaji for today, June 5th. Swamiji writes, say what you mean and then stop. People often drag out a thought quite unnecessarily. In writing, in conversation, and very much so in public speaking, it is important to be clear, succinct, and satisfied with sufficiency. Short reading, so I'll just read one more time. Just pay attention a little bit. Say what you mean and then stop. People often drag out a thought quite unnecessarily. In writing, in conversation, and very much so in public speaking, it is important to be clear, succinct, and satisfied with sufficiency. Swamiji is inviting us to be clear, to be succinct, to be sufficient with what has been said. Before I came to Ananda, I was in software. I understand IT a little bit more than some of us because that's what my work. And then many at Ananda actually know my past history also. Dhyanaji is one of them, and then some others as well. So whenever there is some issue with computer or some technical questions they have, they many times ask me, write a WhatsApp or an email. And because I sort of spent quite amount of time in my life earlier, I understand that field. So I can be very precise with my instructions to them. I can be very particular. If the question isn't clear, I can really ask them very specific questions. So it doesn't become a verbose communication, and most likely we get to the bottom of it. And that's the clarity Swami is also talking about. It is true, isn't it? Like if I invite you to reflect on, is there anything that you're clear of? Certainly, there will be few things that we know, we are absolutely sure of, or we have understood it somehow by our own experience, or because probably we spent some time studying that field and some expertise that we have got. And that's why we also say, no, I'm good at it. And when we are good at something, it is easy in that case to become clear about that also. I think it is Einstein, I'm probably paraphrasing his sentence. He says that if you cannot say something clearly and succinctly, you probably have not understood that to the full capacity. And isn't that true? Something that is understood, that is really well known, we don't need to speak much about that. We understand it and we can just say it, we can even convey it in a very short. But especially if it is not understood entirely, then we take this roundabout way, and then we probably we are mostly, it seems like we are on the fly thinking, at the same time we are also trying to navigate our way while we are trying to convey the answer also. And then if the listener is wise, they understand that this is not going anywhere. And that is part of it. There is another thing that also Swami is like, he says, state it and then stop. Even at times when we are clear about our intentions, what happens is we want to impose our point, or we basically want to just belabor that point because we want to convey and then make a connection to the listener. But also it is important to realize what is the listener's capacity. So these are the two aspects today I would like to explore a little bit in the short time that we have. Now, first and foremost of this sentence says, this reading today says, is basically you have to be clear. Now, to be clear, we ourselves have to be clear. Just the way we were just mentioning before, if we ourselves have not understood, it is very difficult to say it clearly because we ourselves are not very clear about that fact. And if you read Swami Kriyananda's writings, his books, or if you listen to his music, or for that matter, if you listen to his talks, there is a clarity, there is a very precision. It's, of course, I think he understood, we all know that he understood the topic, the subject that he was talking about, but beyond that, he was also very meticulous in terms of how it can be represented. Now, we recently, I like music and I like Swamiji's music a lot also. And in last few years of his lifetime, he went over all his music compositions, and some of the words he modified. Now, think about that. This is the music that many of his students have been singing for like decades, but he went back to look at those lyrics and he felt maybe this word is more apt. One of the songs is brothers, and then there he changed the word from those who know himself. Those who know himself know all as brothers. So that himself word he changed to those who know the truth know everyone as their brothers. Now these words are very subtle. It's not, we also call that you need to know yourself. But instead of that, he just said you need to know the truth in absolute sense. So it's not that it's a mistake that he was speaking, but what is it that actually captures the real essence that he wants to convey? And he was very meticulous about that. Paramahansa Yogananda ji gave him an assignment that in this lifetime you're going to do a lot of editing, a lot of teaching, and a lot of public speaking, and he did all three of them. But if you also reflect back how he started, and he writes about that in Autobiography of a Yogi, that first time when he met Paramahansa Yogananda ji, he said that, and that time Yogananda ji was writing a book, and he said like, why don't you come with me and help me edit? Swamiji was very fresh, very new at that time, so but he was enthusiastic. This is an opportunity for him to be with Swami, with Master. So he did go, without absolutely any idea about what it's being asked of him. So Master gave him his writing essays, go now and do the editing, but don't change a word. Now that's a very interesting instruction, isn't it? You're supposed to do editing, but you're not supposed to change a word. And that, Swamiji also struggled with that for quite some time. Till one point you realize he didn't really mean it in the sense that don't change a word, but he says you shouldn't change a thought. Now, in some ways, Swamiji was a little relieved that he understood what he actually meant, but at the same time it is even a taller responsibility. What it put on Swamiji is he first now has to understand what Master is trying to say. He has to touch the thought, the same thought Master has touched, because once that is touched, then they're all on the same boat, and then from there his editing work can really start. And that is the first stage, which is getting clear about what is the thought that we are trying to say. In our readings, in our teachings, there's a lot of literature we have. Master has written a lot of books. Swamiji took it from him. He thought that maybe Master has written enough, but Master said no, far more is required. So he has written, he has created so much material. When I first came to the path and I started reading many of the books, I also like especially reading these kind of books. So I read the book Raja Yoga, and then everything was making sense. But I didn't make any special effort to really make any connection. Some of you, or probably many of you, have read that book, have certainly heard about yamas and niyamas. I'll just take that as an example. When I looked through that, non-violence was there, truthfulness, and then asteya, brahmacharya, and all those things, they all made sense, but I felt, well, I'm not a violent person. So yeah, it was like a tick, it's done. And then the truthfulness comes, I don't lie, meaning I don't say I never lied, but most likely there is not something that habitually that I do. So it's another tick. So it seems, yeah, next chapter, And it's not that I was trying to be boastful about myself. I didn't sort of connect to the depth that probably Swamiji wanted us all to connect to that level. Now, this is sort of an invitation that this reading also says, is first we have to be absolutely clear. Now that absolute clarity comes only when we connect to the same thought in these books or anything that we are trying to do, we connect to that same one. So this is another invitation we try to do it here also in Delhi, but everywhere as a student of yoga, as a student of master, as a student of Swamiji, what we have to do is basically look at what they are trying to say, and then take that thought and then eat it, digest it, and then make it your own. Now, the same thing I was talking about non-violence, like one of the exercise I would invite us, all of us to do is when, of course, we are not violent in that sense that we don't go and then hurt someone physically. Very rarely, actually, we would also intentionally cause any thought violence to our friends or family, or even if you are think that they are doing something wrong or something, we don't cause intentional violence. So then why are we still studying nonviolence? Why are we doing that? And then the question, then I realize I have to ask myself question, not that I am practicing nonviolence or not. The problem, or the way I was looking at, is if I have understood it. I certainly had understood it. I think most of us have understood it. But then the question I had to ask myself later on is, am I actually practicing it consciously? What is my contribution that I am not a non-violent person? I am a non-violent person. Or what is my contribution that I am a truthful person? Yes, probably it's from, maybe in my past lives I might have practiced, but in this, there wasn't anything, a conscious attempt. I'm just a good person. But that is what the fallacy is. And then we say, okay, if I'm not practicing anything consciously, let me look it deeply. And then we ask ourselves a question, am I violent at any point in time in my entire communication or in my behavior? And then I realized it was actually true. Yes, when things were very, very nice, of course, there is no problem. But if, for example, in my case, there is a friend I have, and at times we have a disagreement or a very verbal communication which doesn't go well, it hurts me at times. And then, as a result, I do reciprocate. I found a place where I felt I don't follow that principle completely. Now here, while I was sad to find that thing out, and I still struggle at times when I realize that, but also as a yogi, these are the times when we feel, okay, now this is the time to practice. These are the events which allow us to look at what we really are, look at the things which actually how they work inside ourselves. Because unless we work on them, unless and only when we look at these kind of incidences, then we get more clarity, how our reactive system works. Otherwise, it's all just becoming theoretical. And then the more theoretical, we won't get the same clarity. Swamiji had to go through his journey so that he can understand what Master's thought was trying to tell. And in the moment you get to touch that thought, then everything else is taken care of. Why? Master Swamiji eventually, as you probably know, had to leave Paramahansa Yoganandaji's organization and eventually started Ananda. Only based on those 3 years of work that he had spent with Master, he had assimilated something. He had connected the same reservoirs of thoughts that Master was trying to bring it to all of us. So after decades, then one time when he felt that he has to reproduce or he has to write something about those thoughts. So that's where he started writing books. One of the most profound books that Swamiji has written is Essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And how did he write it? He just tuned into the same reservoir that once upon a time Paramahansa Yoganandaji has asked him to tune to, and then it flowed. Okay? The thoughts were understood. He was already swimming in the pool of those thoughts. All he had to do is to let that channel flow. Those who have seen Swamiji at that moment, they talk about, like, he used to write like 10 pages, 15 pages in a single day. Now, it's not just writing, he was creating those pages. So at times these people who were there with him couldn't even keep up with it. Why? But he finished that book in 3 months, they say. And it's a pretty fat book and intense. It is Bhagavad Gita. contains the biggest truth which has a capacity to solve the mystery of our existence. 3 months, Swamiji finished that book. And how did he do that? Because he was absolutely clear. And that clarity he achieved when he was with Master by his own effort, by looking at every thought, by chewing that thought, by eating that thought, and taking it like one small thing at a time. That's what we probably have to do. When we talk about, before even be able to share with someone, the first factor is assimilate. Make it your own. When you understand, from that understanding now, we have something to share. And then that brings me to the second part of the equation that we're talking about. He says, we have understood it. Then the next question comes is like, how can we share it? How can we share it so that it is meaningful? What did Swami say? He says, say the truth and stop. Why? Because part of the thing is like we want to share it in the sense we also have to be understand in the sense how much is the other person capable of receiving it. And it is not saying that one person is more or less, or we're not being judgmental about their receptivity, but also it allows you to tune into their realities in terms of what is the texture in which the same truth, the same clarity can be expressed. I mentioned this earlier, but I'll again say it. When Swamiji was saying, Master, why do you want me to write more? Because you have written everything that is needed. And in some way it was true. The absolute truths were written by Master. Swami Sri Yukteswarji has written such a tiny book called Holy Science. Even all the truths are also even in that 50, 100 pages that he has written. So Swamiji's question was very right in terms of like, why should I write more? To which Master said, don't say that more, much more is needed. And why is much more needed? Is because look around. And look around even within our friends, a very close family, even those who are very close to our hearts, we are so different. We are so different, even the same truth we perceive in a many different ways, isn't it? We talk about the same thing and then we look at it from different angles. And that is what Master said, like, take it. This is what I want you to give to people, show them, but then speak the language they speak. And then Swami did. Swamiji wrote music so that those people who are more interested in art and through that they want to connect to the divine, they have a capacity to do that. He wrote books, and even within books there are many different textures. He has written Out of Labyrinth, which basically talks more about or addresses more those who basically want to believe but can't. That's how he says. So he created all those expressions so that people can choose, okay, this is something I can digest. And the same thing also comes from us. Like when we want to share some things, not that we're saying, okay, you're not ready for it. That's not what I meant. It's like, where does the person stand? What is happening inside? When, if we are absolutely clear what we want to give, then we also hold the capacity to bring that person in that, and then around that we can bring our own teaching. We recently did a class, or we're actually doing it at the moment with Prisha and some EFL teachers, Gayatri. And part of the thing, again, it's a wonderful course and it's a wonderful book. Another creation of Swamiji is Education for Life, where Swamiji talks about three gravities. He talks about heavy and then medium light and very light, or medium heavy and light. And what does this gravity means is like, again, talking about children, isn't it? It's like when their children could be very heavy, meaning it's very difficult to move them. And then there are some children which probably fall in the middle category, which is middle heavy or semi-light, you should say. And there are some who are very easygoing and then very easy to deal with. They can be light. Now, as we were trying to understand what does that really mean? And then is there like a sample set? So the teacher there invited us to just reflect within ourselves. Like I say, do you find yourself heavy at times? Yeah. If I am unwilling to do something, if I am just feeling too bored, if I'm feeling too down, yes, I find myself a little bit more heavy. And then same thing, do you find yourself a little bit more ego active or the rajasic energy in between? I found myself in that. And then the same thing she said, so instead of looking for sample set outside, when you within yourself reflect that, you find a connection. And this connection helps you get the larger picture also. Why I'm sharing that again, when we go out and then either to teach or to write, and if we know our audience, what happens is like when they share something, we can find the same connection within ourselves. And then that connection, when we are trying to find, just in the same case, these two connections help us share the teaching in much better way. I'm not saying only share the teaching I said, but any point you want to convey. Otherwise, if we are not able to connect, it again becomes like a very lengthy and long discussion. One final point I want to share, which Swami says here, and be satisfied. Be satisfied with the succinctness. Because we cannot prove or convince anyone of anything, but we have the capacity, if those who are open, to give what we have received. For all the teachers and those who share the teachings, or for that matter, anything that we want to share, Swamiji said there's a capacity that you can give them not just the theory that you have got inside yourself, but you can also give them, or you have to give them, the bliss. Now, this seems, okay, how can we do that? Now, I have read a few things, but what the experiences that Masters describes in Samadhi and all those and some esoteric things, we probably haven't experienced. But then Swamiji still invites us to give that bliss to those who are listening to us, those with whom we want to share anything that we want to share. And then to that, do we wait till we achieve Samadhi? One way to look at is that, but from where we stand now, till like whenever that stage will come, when we will understand Samadhi and reach the maximum understanding wisdom, it's not one big giant step, isn't it? So at every moment when we make an attempt to understand and to connect to the truth, we understand something a little bit, okay? And that is our own experience, you know. I was talking about the non-violence earlier. If you understand something within ourselves, okay, this is what I'm working with. So then that you can share. And then anybody who resonates with the type of work that you're doing, now there is a direct connection. And when you share from that connectedness to the other person's connectedness, it's a good sharing of bliss. So these are the few thoughts I wanted to share today. And then again, just to end on the thought that what is that Swami says in all these readings is get clarity, do your study, do your swadhyaya, and put these teachings into your daily practices so that we can actually be an embodiment of these teachings rather than just quoting things from here, because that alone has the capacity to bring clarity to ourselves. The wisdom that we seek will be ours, and then it will be much easy and much profound to bring it to others, to our loved ones, anybody who seeks sincerely. Joy to you.